Should you ever buy Avios? I think a lot of people would automatically say no to that question, but I think they're wrong. I think you'd be surprised at how useful this could be. I want you to imagine something with me. You've been saving up your points for a few months and you want to book yourself that business class flight that you've been watching all those YouTube videos on. Log into the British Airways account, you go to make a reward booking and you find that there is actually reward availability, but you don't have enough points. What do? Do you just give up on the flight? Do you decide to bite the bullet and pay with cash, costing yourself potentially thousands? Do you decide, well, I better save up for a few more months and just hope that the availability is still there for the date you want to go on? Or do you simply just buy the points? Strangely, there are quite a few different ways that you can actually buy Avios. And each one of these different ways gives different levels of value for money. So today I'm going to talk you through each of these different methods. I'm going to tell you which ones give you the best value for money, which one you should avoid at all costs, and I'll explain when buying points could be really worth it for you. Now I'm going to be throwing up the odd number here or there to prove the points that I'm making, but I'm going to try not to get too bogged down in the detail. I'm just going to try and give you the main principles you need to know to understand when it's worth it for you or not. I just want to acknowledge first though that all of us do probably buy points in a way, even if not directly. For example, I have a couple of Amex credit cards that earn me Avios points, but I could instead choose to get a cashback card, and I'm choosing instead to get for the points. So I'm effectively buying those points at the cost of the cashback that I could have had. Similarly, when I earn Nectar points through Sainsbury's, I could use those points for my shopping, but instead I transfer those out to Avios to book for flights. Effectively, when we do this, we are buying those Avios points for cash, even though we're not directly choosing to purchase them. And for those of us that do this, we'll usually justify that by quite rightly saying that we can get much better value for that money if we do use them for points. You know, for example, not too long ago, I spent about $500,000 Avios on a series of first class and business class flights for next year. Overall, I got about 8p per Avios for those redemptions on average. So clearly I'm getting great value for those points compared to if I just used the cash. However, if I was never really willing to actually pay the cash price for that, have I really got good value? These are the kind of things that you need to think about when you're considering buying points. So if you are going to buy points to book flights, whether that's buying the points directly or indirectly, you do need to give some consideration to the total cost of that booking. It's probably best to illustrate this with a quick example. So let's say you wanted to book a flight in Qatar Q Suites from Heathrow to Doha. That'll cost you 43,000 Avios, and you'll also pay £321 in taxes and charges. So a lot of people would look at that and say, oh, well, this flight would have cost me £3,000. I'm only paying 300 odd quid, so I've saved myself a couple of £1,000s. That might be technically true, but if you've earned the bulk of your points through things like credit card spend, or maybe if you've bought the points, you still need to then factor in the cost of acquiring those. To keep things really simple, let's just assume you have a credit card that earns 1 Avios per pound. Alternative to that could have been earning 1% cashback. So based on that, you're choosing to take an Avios for the cost of 1 penny because you could have otherwise earned a penny for that, but instead you've earned 1 Avios. Using that valuation, that flight to Qatar would be 43,000 Avios or otherwise £430 plus the £321 in taxes and charges. So the total cost of that flight in that situation would be £751. And this is where you really work out, is it worth buying points or is it worth earning points in this way? If you look at that Qatar Q Suite flight from Heathrow to Doha and you say, yeah, I would absolutely pay 751 quid for that flight. I know I would personally, I definitely think it's worth it. If that's worth it to you, then it's worth buying points to pay for this, or it's worth earning points instead of earning cash back. So if we understand that basic principle of why paying for points might be worthwhile because of the value we can get for those points, let's look at the different ways that you can buy Avios. The first way is that when you're making a booking, you can choose to pay a lower amount of Avios and a higher amount in taxes and charges. So let's say I want to fly to New York. If I was going to be doing that in business class, the standard amount it would charge me would be 90,000 Avios and £187.50. However, when I do go to make that booking, I can choose to pay a lower amount of Avios. So if I didn't quite have the full balance, or if I just chose not to use that many Avios, I can pay a higher charge. And in this case, that higher amount that I could choose to pay is £332.50. And that reduces the Avios I need by 15,000. So effectively, I'm buying 15,000 Avios and I'm getting that at a cost of £145. Now that works out to about 0.96p per Avios, which isn't a bad rate to pay at all. If we are buying an Avios at 0.96p per point, it means that that flight that costs us 75,000 Avios plus the £332, if you assign that value to the Avios, you're paying just over £1,000. I think it works out about £1,050. I'll throw up the exact numbers on the screen here just to show you the maths on that. So again, the question you've got to ask yourself is, if you would be willing to pay in cash £1,050 for that flight, then it would be worth it for you to buy those points and to book that ticket. The second method of acquiring Avios is to directly buy Avios from the BA website. So there is an option on there to just buy Avios. And if you do it this way, it does tend to be the most expensive way of acquiring Avios. So there's a few different bundles you can go from. I think the lowest you can do is 2,000 Avios and the highest you can do is 200,000 Avios. And you do get a slightly better rate the more that you buy. At the low end of it, you can buy 2,000 Avios. That is at a cost of £45. So if you do that, you're effectively buying an Avios for 2.45p. And that is a ridiculous amount to spend. There's absolutely no way that it's worth it. Yes, you could technically get value for those. Like I mentioned before, I did some redemptions recently where I was getting 8p per Avios. So if I bought Avios at 2.45p per point, I'm still getting about 4 times the value for that. But considering you can acquire Avios so much cheaper than that, I don't recommend using it. And even at the higher end of it, if you bought the full 200,000, that 200,000 costs you over 3.5 grand. And even at that rate, you're only getting 1.77p per Avios. So again, you can buy these points for much cheaper than that using the next two methods that I'm going to tell you about. So that third method is an Avios subscription. And using this, you can get a bundle of points dropped in your account every single month. And there's two ways of paying for this. You can either pay up front for a year. So you pay that on the start of the year, and then every month for 12 months, you get a certain amount deposited in your account, or you can pay every single month. And you get a better rate, so you're spending less if you did pay up front for the full year. Now at the lower end of this, you can get 20,000 points over the course of the year, so that's 1,667 points per month. For this on a monthly basis, it'll cost you £26 per month, or you can pay up front for the year for £259, and that works out at a rate of 1.3 pence per Avios, which isn't terrible, but it's also not as good as we can get. At the top end of this, you can get 200,000 Avios over the course of the year. That's at a cost of £1,989. So you are saving a lot compared to the buying Avios up front, as we mentioned before, but you are obviously drip feeding those over the course of the year. The risk with this, I think, as well, is that, yeah, you might be confident that you're going to be able to use that number of points, so you might be fine just having those drip in throughout the year. But if there was any devaluation to Avios or reward flights started getting more expensive, you're not really protected against that because you're then tied in at still buying those points at that same rate. But if you know that you're always going to be spending a high amount of Avios through the year, there's lots of flights that you're planning to book, it might not be a bad thing to buy at this rate. The fourth method to mention is Avios Boost. This is a relatively recent introduction that they've brought in. And the way this one works is that you can boost your Avios earning for that month by a factor of 1 times, 2 times or 3 times. So let's say over the last 30 days you've earned 10,000 Avios. You can pay to boost that by 1 times and get an additional 10,000. You can do it by 2 times and get an additional 20,000, or 3 times to get an additional 30,000. And you don't have to boost all the points you earn that month. You can be selective on that, so you don't have to go quite up to that level. You can do it in increments. But if you've had a month where you haven't earned that many Avios, then obviously it limits how many that you can buy. So that's the main downfall of this. You have to be earning a decent amount of Avios to be able to boost them. But you can increase the amount that you've earned a bit artificially. So for example, I earn membership reward points with my Amex Platinum. If I transfer those membership reward points to Avios, that counts within the Avios that I've earned that month. And I can then do a 3 times boost on the amount that I've transferred over. So if I look at the example of my own account at the moment, this month I can boost just over 350,000 Avios if I really want. and that would set me back £3,636. So quite a lot of money to part with for those Avios, but I would be paying just marginally above 1p per Avios, and given that I'd be confident that I can get better value for that, it maybe would be worthwhile if I had a lot more flights to book with Avios coming up. One thing that's worth noting though is that unlike some of the previous methods that we discussed, going for the highest amount won't necessarily get you the lowest cost here, because there's only a certain amount that you can get at the booster rate. If you do boost to a higher amount of Avios above that, the cost is actually a little bit higher. So when I did the 3 times boost, it was showing me a cost of just over 1p per Avios. But when I boosted at a lower amount and went for the 2 times, I was actually getting a rate of 0.94p per Avios. So that was actually the sweet spot for me. So if you do have points that you've earned and you want to be able to boost them, that will be the most cost-effective way of doing it. It's cheaper than just buying points directly, it's faster than doing a subscription, and it is giving you a better rate than just reducing the number of Avios that you pay on a purchase. So if you were going to choose that lower Avios amount to pay for a flight, you might actually be better off boosting to give yourself enough points to be able to book that flight instead. But the difference between those two methods was pretty close, to be honest. So ultimately, paying for Avios can be a brilliant deal if you don't have enough points to book the flight. If you are someone that earns way more points than you'd ever need to actually buy for the flights you're taking each year, then yeah, it'll probably never be worthwhile. But if you do find yourself flying a lot, or if you don't find yourself earning a great deal of Avios, then actually buying them could give you a massive saving over just buying for the cash fare. But before you go ahead and buy the Avios, there's 2 main things you need to consider. Firstly, definitely want to make sure there is actually reward availability for the flights that you want to book. The last thing you want to do is spend a few thousand buying a load of points and then find that you can't actually use them. So make sure there's reward availability first, or at least make sure that you have enough flexibility in your plans that if you don't have reward availability on the exact day you want, you'll still be able to make something work. And the second thing is to just make sure you do that calculation. Now, you can do the exact calculation, you can work out the exact amount that you'll be buying the Avios for, do the 0.96p thing. But I think probably the easiest thing to do is just do that rough calculation. It'll cost you roughly 1p per Avios to buy them, so long as you're using the correct methods. Based on that, just look at the number of points that are required for the booking, divide that by 100, and that's the amount in pounds it'll cost you to buy those points roughly. So then take that amount, add it to the taxes and charges charged for the reward flight, and that's your total cost in cash. If that's a big saving compared to what the actual cash ticket would be, and if it's something that you think is good value, then buy those points and book the ticket. I hope you found that helpful. If you do want to learn a bit more about earning and redeeming points and making the most out of the British Airways Executive Club, make sure to watch this playlist next. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.